Good morning and welcome to St James for worship on Sunday the 6th of November. If you're tuning into this service, you will very quickly realise that this is not the normal live stream of our worship that we would normally do. And the reason for that is that today is the day of prayer for the persecuted church. And as people are turning up to St James this morning, what they will discover is that the doors behind me are firmly locked. There'll be signs on the door saying that due to new government regulations, all Christian worship has been banned, and anyone entering this building is liable to prosecution, which could result in a fine or imprisonment. And people will be directed from the church building over to our parish centre, and we will be gathering to worship this morning in our parish centre. So we won't be live streaming this morning's service, but we will be focusing on the plight of Christians who are being persecuted for their faith. And the reason for doing it this way is people are not expecting to find the church locked and closed and their way into church barred. But this is the reality, and this is the experience of many Christians around the world who are not able to worship in public or to enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy as Christians here in this country. There are many millions of Christians around the world who have to meet in secret, and many Christians who, if they are even allowed to gather for worship in a building such as this, know that they're being monitored, know that they're being recorded and observed by the government, and at any point in time they could get a knock on the door and be arrested. So we're not going to live stream this morning's service, but instead, if you're watching online, what you will see is a whole series of different videos from different organisations that work with supporting the persecuted church. So if you're joining us online, I just invite you to watch these videos and use these videos as a catalyst for you to find out more about the suffering church and to pray for the suffering church, but also to hear about what different organisations are doing to support our brothers and sisters in Christ. So thank you for joining us, and I hope that you find the videos that we're going to show now really helpful to you. God bless.
Countless Christians across the world are persecuted because of their faith. And this persecution can take many different forms: oppression, displacement, martyrdom, and imprisonment. Being imprisoned for your faith means suffering injustice, losing your freedom, being separated from your church and family, and facing the prospect of mistreatment from prison authorities and fellow inmates. In China, the church is under pressure from the communist authorities, and the number of Christians being detained for their faith has increased dramatically. Pastor Wang Yi is currently serving a 9-year prison sentence, and on the outside, his family are under constant surveillance. In Eritrea, many Christians have been incarcerated for their faith over the last 20 years. Dr. Kiflu Gebremeskel has been in prison since 2004. He has never been brought to trial, and he has been prevented from seeing his wife and 4 children for long periods. In Pakistan, Christians are vulnerable to false allegations of blasphemy. This can result in long detentions without trial and, in some cases, a death sentence. Zafar Bhatti was falsely accused of sending a blasphemous text message and has now been in prison for more than a decade. In the New Testament book of Hebrews, the writer tells us to remember those in prison as if we were together with them. So on this International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church, we commit to remember those in prison for their faith as if we were with them. We count them as family, we stand with them, and we pray for them. Through our network of international partners, Release International is helping to support Christian prisoners of faith and their families with legal aid, practical provisions, and pastoral care in several countries across the world.
क्योंकि मम्मा का भी लहू लुहान कर रखा था उन लोगों ने, और सिस्टर के भी मतलब कि कपड़े फटे हुए थे। तो जैसे मैं मम्मी के पास जाने लगी, उन्होंने मेरे सर में मारा। काफ़ी कंडीशन बिगड़ गई, मेरे को हॉस्पिटल में लेके जाया गया। और काफ़ी मतलब कि जब मेरी हालत काफ़ी ख़राब थी, मतलब कि ऐसा ही था वहाँ पे, मतलब कि डॉक्टर्स को प्रेशराइज किया गया ताकि मेरा ट्रीटमेंट ना हो। जब मुझे होश आया वही सारी बातें मेरे माइंड में आ गई एकदम। तो जब मेरे को ये सब चीज़ें मेरे माइंड में आई तो मेरे को सिर्फ कैसे बोलेंगे कि कैसे मैं उनको फेस कर पाऊंगी, क्योंकि मेरे अंदर इतनी मतलब कि मैं इतनी कॉन्फिडेंस लेवल नहीं था, खत्म हो गया था वो। एक ही ख्याल आया कि अब मुझको लाइफ खत्म करनी है, मैं जीना नहीं चाहती। लेकिन जब मैंने अपनी फैमिली को देखा, मेरी मम्मा ने मेरे को मोटिवेट किया कि उन्होंने बताया बोला कि खुदावन ने मतलब कि सलीब पे अपनी जान दी, और तीसरे दिन हमारे पापों के लिए मारा गया, गाड़ा गया, तीसरे दिन मुर्दों में से जिंदा हुआ। और उन्होंने इतना कुछ सहा, और तुम सिर्फ एक मतलब कि इस कारण अपनी लाइफ ख़त्म करना चाहती हो कि तुम्हारे साथ ये इंसिडेंट हुआ। उनकी सलीब को याद कर, खुदावन को पुकार, वो तुम्हें बल और शक्ति देंगे। जिन लोगों ने मेरे साथ ऐसा किया तो मैंने तभी उनको माफ़ कर दिया था, क्योंकि जब खुदावंद के साथ ये सब चीज़ें हुई, सलीब पर उनको चढ़ाया गया, उन्होंने उनको जिन्होंने उनके साथ ऐसा किया था उनको माफ़ किया हमारे पापों के लिए। और हर इस सिचुएशन से बाहर आने में मेरी खुदा ने मदद सहायता करी। आपने मेरी मदद की, उनको भी मैं धन्यवाद करती हूँ। और खुदावंद उनको और भी ज़्यादा ब्लेस करे और बढ़ाए, और सभी लोगों की रूहों को बचाने के लिए उनका इस्तेमाल करे।
በሚስጥር ነው የምንሰበሰበው። መንግስት አያውቅም። ደግሞ የአካባቢ ያለው አማኝ ያልሆኑ ሰዎች ደግሞ አያውቅም። ለዛ ለአገልግሎት የተመረጡ ቤቶች አሉ። ደግሞ ይቀያየራል። አንዴ በአንድ ቤት ካደረግን ሌላ ደግሞ በሌላ ቤት እየቀያየር ነው የምናደርገው። አንዴ ከታወቀ የሴኩሪቲ ይመጣል፣ ሰዎች ደግሞ ይታሰራሉ፣ ይታፈሳሉ።
እየታሰሩ ነው። መሪ ቢታሰር ሌላ መሪ ይመጣል፣ መሪ ይታሰራል፣ ሌላ መሪ ይመጣል፣ አገልጋይ ይታሰራል፣ ሌላ አገልጋይ ደግሞ ቤተክርስቲያኑ እያፈረች ለእስር ቤት የማይፈሩ ለሞት የማይፈሩ ትውልድ ቤተክርስቲያኑ እያነሳች ናት።
حقيقة ኣብ ኤርትራ ዘላ ቤተክርስቲያን ተዓብላ ብዙሕ ዕቤት ዘለዋ ብዙሓት ነብሳት ኣለዋ ሓደሽቲ ዝወሃብና ዘለዋ ቁጥሪ ናይ ምእመን ብዙሕ ዝውስኽ ዘሎ ስለዚ ብርግፅ ኤርትራ ተዓቢያ ዘላ ኤርትራ ቤተክርስቲያን ተዓቢያ ዘላ ሰባት ድማ ይተን ዘለዉ እሱ ጥራይ ኣይኮነን ብፍቕሪ ድማ ዝተኣስረት ቤተክርስቲያን ንሓድሕዱ ብፍቕሪ ዝተኣሳሰረ ቤተክርስቲያን እዩ ድማ ምክንያቱ ኣብዚ ናይ መከራ ግዜ ሰብ ንኣምላኽ ፅቡቅ ገይሩ ክፈልጦ ገይርዎ እዩ።
What do you do when it all falls apart? What do you do when everything gets taken away? When all that you have worked so hard to build gets shut down, or worse, becomes nothing more than a load of ruins and a handful of ash? Every day around the world, persecuted Christians find themselves standing in the ruins and asking, where did God go? We may not share their exact experiences, but suffering and loss is something that we will all share at some point in our lives. What we learn from their stories, indeed what we learn from the Bible itself, is that it's no shame to find ourselves in the ruins. Because in the ruins, we have the opportunity to encounter a different God than the one we'd imagined. And in the ruins, we discover the revolutionary power of lament.
When my parents found out and the neighbors found out and then the government authorities found out, I was taken to court and my pregnancy out of wedlock was charged as a crime, and for this crime I was put in prison. I was given lashes. And because of all this, I gave birth to a premature child. I was trying to live normal life, and especially trying to keep a secret about the book I read about my relationship with Lord Jesus. But you can't hide the Lord. He's a bright, shining light. And soon my parents found out, soon neighbors found out, and soon it was heard by the religious authorities. And I was taken to questioning. And when I was in front of people that were questioning me whether all this was true, that I have read the Bible and whether I have believed in Lord Jesus, I knew I should not say yes. But in spite of myself, I found myself saying yes, that I was a follower of Lord Jesus. My main ministry is hospitality. People from my country comes where I am for medical treatment. So I open my house for them. I provide for them free place to stay and free food, and also go with them as a medical guide and a translator. And it is at times hard because these very people will sometimes not want to eat with me because I'm a follower of Jesus. Thank you so much for everyone who is praying. I know that there have been people who have been praying for me for years and have never ever met me, and but they continuously pray, and I just want to thank them for their faithfulness to the Lord. I'm not able to go back to my community, even though time passes. I will never get used to that. It's painful, but I also know that I belong to the community of God, and I do.
My name is Paul. Because I am a Christian, I spent over 10 years in prison in Eritrea. I had become a Christian after being depressed for many years. Nothing made me happy, not my job, my money, or doing as I pleased. A colleague who was not a believer suggested that I ask some Christians for help. These Christians taught me that true happiness was not in material things, but through faith in Jesus. So I joined the church. In 2002, the government decided to allow only 3 types of churches in Eritrea. They closed most other churches and started arresting their members. They eventually arrested all the members of my church too. That day, the commander tried to get us to stop our Christian activities. He asked me, "Aren't you ashamed of belonging to a church that the government does not allow?" "I am not ashamed," I replied. Then he ordered, "His mind has been ruined, throw him in jail." In prison, we didn't have enough food. We were always dirty. We had almost no medicine. Sometimes I was kept in solitary confinement. Other times, I was with many other Christians in a dungeon. It was extremely hot. If only we signed a paper promising to stop praying, sharing our faith, and meeting with other Christians, we could go home. But we couldn't agree to that because it would be dishonest. Eventually, after many years, some Christians signed the paper and were set free. I too was tempted to give in to the pressure. Why am I still here? Would it be so bad if I signed that paper? But then I remembered that my hope wasn't in material things or in my circumstances, but in Jesus. Remembering the joy that I found in Jesus helped me to stay strong. Just after that, without signing the paper, I was suddenly released. I was so happy, but I soon met new challenges. I don't have a job or money, and I feel like a stranger to my family and friends. It is lonely, but I hold on to the strength I found in prison. The love I receive from Christians all over the world has helped me so much. Even though they don't know me, they prayed for me and helped me while I was in prison and after my release. The persecution would have broken my spirit had it not been for God's care shown through them.
Hello, this is Brother Andrew. Some people call him God's smuggler because he spent his life smuggling Bibles and God's love into all sorts of places where it's very hard to follow Jesus. This is how all his adventures began. Brother Andrew was born in a country in Europe called the Netherlands. He had promised to follow God, so he went to a Bible college in Glasgow, a city in Scotland. It was difficult for him because he didn't speak very good English, but he learnt a lot about God and trusting in him. One day at Bible college, he saw an advert for a big festival in Warsaw, a city in Poland. In 1955, Poland was a communist country, and communists didn't like Christians. Andrew decided to go to the festival and find out if there were any Christians left in Warsaw. So he packed his bags, got on a train, and went all the way to Poland. When he arrived, he felt very alone, but he knew God was with him. On Sunday, he went to find a church. The Polish Christians were really pleased to see him. They thought that Christians in other countries had forgotten all about them. They told him how hard life was for them. They were always being watched by the government. Church leaders had been arrested, and Bible schools closed. Back at the festival, while praying, this Bible verse sprang into Andrew's mind. It said, "Strengthen what remains and is about to die." Suddenly, he felt sure that God was telling him to go and help Christians who were being attacked for following Jesus. So next, he went to Czechoslovakia. He went to a church where an old lady was holding her Bible high in the air so that everyone else could read it. He realized that she was the only one with a Bible. Because the government made it so hard for people to buy Bibles, some of them copied out bits of the Bible by hand. Andrew decided that he would take Bibles to Christians in countries where they were not allowed. But how? Back in the Netherlands, he shared his idea. Some friends gave him money to buy lots of Bibles. One family even gave him a blue car to take them in. He drove to Yugoslavia. It was against the law to take more than one Bible into the country, and he had a car full of them. There were guards at the border. As he drove up, he prayed very hard. "Lord," he said, "you made blind eyes see. Please make seeing eyes blind." First, the guards checked his camping equipment, but they didn't spot the Bibles hidden in his sleeping bag. Then they pulled out his suitcase. The Bibles were right there, but somehow the guards still didn't see them. So they sent Andrew on his way. God had stopped the guards from seeing the Bibles. After that, Andrew went to other countries delivering Bibles. He gave them out to Christians in Bulgaria, Romania, and Russia too. Hundreds of Bibles were delivered to Christians. Andrew soon found out that there was too much for him to do on his own. He needed others to join him. That was the beginning of the organisation Open Doors, which ever since has helped Christians who are being badly treated because they follow Jesus. Today, Open Doors does a lot more than just smuggle Bibles. Sometimes Christians have to run away from their homes because people want to kill them. So Open Doors helps them with food, water, clothes, and blankets. Then, when it's safe to go back, it helps them to rebuild their homes. In some countries, Christian children have no chance to go to school, so Open Doors helps them learn to read and write. In places where Christian children are bullied or have no other Christians around them, Open Doors brings them together for special days and summer camps. And Open Doors still smuggles Bibles into some countries in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Someday, perhaps you will go on an adventure like Brother Andrew. But there are some things you could start right away. You could pray for Christians who are unfairly treated because they follow Jesus. Christians who are being attacked for following Jesus can feel very alone. You could write a letter or draw a picture and send it to them. And there are lots of fun ways to raise money to give them what they need. Maybe you could even pay to send them more Bibles. Whatever you do, it will make a big difference to their lives. And it could just be the start of an adventure of your own. In the Bible, Jesus says, "See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." What would you like to do for others in your new adventure with God?
There are signs that a renewed crackdown is underway against China's churches. Partners of UK-based Release International have compiled disturbing video evidence of a police raid where Christian women collapsed and other church members were manhandled. In 2018, China passed tough new laws tightening state control over religion. In March this year, China cracked down on religious content on the internet. And in recent weeks, there's been a series of police raids on churches, some marked by violence. On August the 21st, security forces raided Sunshine Reformed Church in Jilin Province, as these video clips reveal. Police burst in and hauled away the pastor, his wife, and 7 others. They beat members of the congregation. 2 women passed out. Church after church has been raided, including a Christian summer camp attended by parents and their children. In some regions, the authorities have torn down hundreds of crosses from churches and bulldozed entire church buildings. A report by the US State Department says clergy of all faiths are now required to attend political indoctrination sessions and to pledge allegiance to the Communist Party of China. Think about that for a second. An atheist state that declares there is no God demands the sworn allegiance of Christians who worship the God that the state refuses to acknowledge. According to the US State Department report, officials have limited online worship, restricted the printing and distribution of Bibles, and destroyed public displays of religious symbols throughout the country. Why? Because at its heart, persecution seeks to control our worship. What those in power cannot control, they try to eliminate. And in China, the persecution is getting worse. Partners of Release International say churches in China are facing their toughest persecution since the Cultural Revolution. UK-based Release has launched an appeal to help Christians in China and elsewhere imprisoned for their faith and who've been driven from their homes due to persecution. Stand for a moment in their shoes. Imagine you turned up to church on Sunday to find the authorities had torn it down, your pastor had been arrested, and police officers were making it abundantly clear that you and other members of your church were under surveillance, just for being Christians. So how best to support the church in China? We can pray for them and we can provide for them, and we can really value the freedom we have and make the best of it.
Nigeria, often referred to as the Giant of Africa, is Africa's most populous country and the 7th most populous in the world. It is one of the world's largest oil producers and is considered to be an emerging market by the World Bank. But many of its inhabitants live with a permanent threat of violent death. There has been Islamic extremist violence against Christians in northern Nigeria from the 1980s, and especially since the beginning of the 21st century. Since 2015, violence has killed more than 6,000 Christians and forced almost 2 million people to flee their homes. It is worth repeating that number. That is more than 6,000 Christians killed in the last 5 years. Thousands of others have been maimed, burned or kidnapped by Boko Haram jihadists or Fulani militants. There is a common pattern to the violence. Militants, armed with guns and machetes, storm into a predominantly Christian village and begin indiscriminately slaughtering men, women, and children. For example, on the 22nd of July 2020, militants with knives and machetes broke into homes of a mainly Christian village, Kitchener, in the southern Kaduna state, murdering 17-year-old Kephas Monday, 14-year-old Lydia Monday, 9-year-old Jumami, 14-year-old Giwa Thomas, and 27-year-old Living Johanna. A Christian leader said that the attacks are now so frequent that they had stopped reporting them. They said, "We seem always to be reporting deaths and attacks, and people are weary of our reports." The carnage has gone largely unchallenged by the Nigerian government. Security forces have failed to stop the violence, and the international media are silent. A church leader lamented, "It is as if the lives of Christians no longer matter in the areas under attack." The faith of persecuted Nigerian Christians is strong, but we must come to their aid.
Somalia on the Horn of Africa is one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a Christian. Islamic law controls every aspect of daily life, and the country is the base for Islamist terror group Al-Shabaab. Christians run the risk of being killed by their supporters or even their own families in so-called honor killings. Samuel is a former imam who was brought to faith in Jesus by a doctor. His father reacted by throwing him into an underground cell. Samuel was rescued by Christians and escaped the country. He began a new life and helped many others to come to know Jesus. But then extremists paid Samuel's wife thousands to go back to Somalia with their children. At an open-air meeting, militants beat Samuel up and left him for dead. And now Al-Shabaab came after him. To track him down, they posted a video of Samuel preaching on YouTube. God used that to preach the gospel in places I could never reach, he says. Other Christians, fearing for their lives, began to desert him. But partners of Release International supported him. Now he's sharing a house with another Christian who, like Samuel, was abandoned by his wife and children. Every time I'm persecuted, says Samuel, I see God's hand in it. Somalia used to be a closed door. Now it's much more open. People have been shaken, and now they're hungry to hear the gospel. Amanda is another Somali from a Muslim background. She was brought up to believe Christianity was evil and Christians were mean, until she met some. They were kind and generous, and Amanda told her husband. He told her she'd been to a dirty place and threw her in the shower. But Amanda went back to those Christians and gave her life to Christ. So her husband beat her, locked her in a room for a year, stopped her seeing her son, and finally left her. Partners of Release International are protecting these new Christians, helping them to find work and introducing them to others. The challenge to those of us living in freedom is how will we use the precious freedom we have? Will we hide away, or will we take the courage to be bold? Eritrea has been described as the North Korea of Africa. According to the UN, more than 500,000 Eritreans have fled their country. Some say 10% of the population, including many Christians. Most churches were forced to close in 2002, and many Christians have been arrested and detained indefinitely. Some have been brutally tortured. As with most totalitarian regimes, what drives the repression is the desire for control.
Christians being the most persecuted group of people in Eritrea is because they wouldn't stop their gathering, they wouldn't stop their worship. It's beyond the government's control and beyond the government's expectation, because Christianity continues to grow in Eritrea.
In recent months, many Christians have been released, causing some speculation about a possible change of heart. But then some Christians were rearrested.
I don't see any change, and the government always say boldly, we haven't changed our policies. The government is not gaining anything by arresting these hundreds of Christians. Even the government is losing a lot by feeding them. So please release them. Their families, their children, their wives, their husbands need them.
Many Christians have fled to neighbouring Ethiopia, whose refugee camps offered safe haven until civil war erupted in the Tigray region. Eritrean troops have joined in the fighting, which has been marked by brutality and has caused famine. It seems that Eritrea is exporting its brutal attitude towards Christians to Tigray. In November 2020, Eritrean forces killed up to 800 civilians in the sacred city of Aksum, including, according to Orthodox Church sources, at least 78 priests. And a former prisoner of the regime, Helen Bahani, says the killing of Christians is continuing in Tigray.
It's overflow from Eritrea to go to Tigray, and they kill a lot of priests. Some of them, they stand with their cross, so they cut their hands. They ask them to remove their hat. So when they say no, they shoot them. There are hundreds priests die in this conflict by Eritrean soldiers. Also, priests' wife, they rape them. I don't know why the world is silent. I don't understand really.
Helen Bahani was imprisoned in Eritrea for her faith. She was locked up with other Christians in a shipping container in the desert, baking by day, freezing by night. And she was tortured. So what sustained her?
Always I'm praying, singing. Also I'm reading my Bible. Also if the situation is very extreme, harsh, I fast. not to change the situation, but to discipline myself and to understand the situation. So I asked God, what's going on? Yeah, I found encouraged words from the Bible. So that's why I encourage people to read their Bible. We are in hard times, so we need to fast and pray.
We pray for protection for all these Christians who are still in Eritrea, and pray for grace so that they could receive with joy all the suffering, because they are doing it for the sake of Christ.
On the 11th July 2021, Cubans poured onto the streets. They were protesting for fundamental freedoms and access to basic necessities that we would take for granted, like bread and medicine. Pastor Lorenzo Rosales Fallado was detained on that day, along with many others, simply for peacefully protesting. But while other protesters have been released, Pastor Lorenzo is still being held. He's in a maximum security prison and has endured severe beatings.
Y después del día 11 de julio hemos vivido momentos terribles. Mi esposo desde entonces está encarcelado por decir la verdad, está encarcelado por marchar junto al pueblo, por apoyarle en sus reclamos de necesidades. Y para mí y para mi familia, han sido momentos muy duros. Hemos tenido que enfrentar retos que jamás imaginamos, tener las fuerzas para poder seguir adelante. Mi hijo, David Lorenzo, de solo 17 años de edad, en esa oportunidad también fue detenido, fue desaparecido durante 7 días, no supimos dónde estaba. Tenemos una niña que tiene 12 años también. Somos una familia muy unida, somos una familia que nos ha tocado enfrentar esta situación de una manera muy difícil, porque mi esposo no está. Todo lo que ha tenido que pasar este año de encarcelamiento, verle enfermo sin recibir atención médica, ver cómo le han negado el derecho de asistir a los cultos religiosos que daban hace solo un mes, le fue autorizado, verle cómo le prohíben que hable con los demás reclusos, verlo sin tener una alimentación adecuada, verlo sufrir en ese lugar por tanta injusticia. Ahora el responsable de mi familia ha sido casi un reto insuperable. Me quedé sin trabajo por ser la esposa del pastor. A los 2 o 3 días de su encarcelamiento fui expulsado. A partir de ahí se me cerraron todas las puertas por ser la esposa del pastor. Tuve que enfrentar toda esta situación de mis hijos, de proveerle en tan difícil situación por la que atraviesa nuestra nación, sin recursos económicos, sin entrada económica, además de tener que llevar adelante la responsabilidad de la iglesia y la responsabilidad de llevar un proceso adelante, de luchar por su libertad, de darle ánimo en medio de todo este asunto, de sufrir al ver todas las injusticias. Y todo esto ha sido algo que sin la ayuda de Dios y sin las oraciones de cada uno de ustedes, de cada hermano, sin cada palabra de ánimo, sin las fuerzas que Dios nos da cada mañana, hubiera sido imposible. Hubiera sido imposible llevar adelante el rol de mi familia, llevar adelante el rol de seguir adelante con el ministerio, con la expansión del reino. Hubiera sido imposible.
Home, we're heading home. We journey on to see our Savior face to face. Close, we're getting close. Our joy is rising higher with each step we take. Forward on to Jesus. We are the people of the cross. We choose Christ and count all else as lost. We won't be shaken, hope won't be taken. We are the people of the cross. Grace, if not for grace, we would be lost without the promise that you gave. Praise, be ever praised. Your spirit burns within us brighter every day. Forward on to Jesus. We are the people of the cross. We choose Christ and count all else as lost. We won't be shaken, hope won't be taken. We are the people of the cross. Jesus, we will be faithful till you meet us. Give us your courage as we finish. We wanna hear well done. Jesus, we will be faithful till you meet us. Give us your courage as we finish. We wanna hear well done. We are the people of the cross. We choose Christ and count all else as lost. And we won't be shaken, hope won't be taken. We won't be shaken, hope won't be taken. We are the people of the cross. We are the people of the cross.